All right, so much art history, never enough time to cover it all. So let's go run through the art museum. We are still in chapter 29. This is part 9. In chapter 29 there's 13. That's why I broke it up into, well, no, in chapter, yeah, I think there's 13.
So many parts. That should be 3 different chapters.
And yeah, that's why I break it up into tests. Not having one. This is your test. Taking notes. It's your final exam for high school. All right. Okay, we are going to Mexico. If I was looking at a world map, where would I go look for Mexico? Hey, that's an easy one. If I were to look for Mexico, where would I look? D. That's right.
I don't know that. You should definitely.
Okay, before we start looking at the art of modern Mexico, we're going to do a little bit of history. So I taught some of the history of Mexico last semester. We started out with the Olmecs. You remember they did the big giant heads. Then we looked at the Mayans, and we looked at some of their artwork. And then we looked at the artwork of the Aztecs. There's lots of other cultures in Mexico and South America. These are the 3 big ones. We're just blowing through this. So there was a long period of Spanish colonization in Mexico. Some of it was friendly, where we have Cortez talking with Moctezuma, but most of it was not. There was a lot of conflict and strife during this era of Spanish conquest in Mexico. There was also a lot of death due to illness and diseases that the Europeans brought over. In fact, I think about 90% of the people that died from disease never saw a European. Right? That's how quickly it spread. So we have centuries of Spanish rule. And then we begin to get Mexican War for Independence. They rise up against the indigenous people of Mexico, rise up against the Spaniards that are living there. There's lots of reasons for the War for Independence, but one of the main reasons is the classes of people. In fact, if I get my laser pointer here, the society in Mexico is pyramidal in shape, where most of the people on the bottom, are the slaved people brought over from Africa and the Caribbean. Then above them are the Native American Indians, the indigenous people of Mexico. And then above them are people that have one of each parent, have an indigenous parent and a European parent. So they have a little bit of a higher status than the indigenous only people. Here are the people who have both European parents, but they were born in Mexico. And then here are people that have both European parents and were born in Spain. All right, those are the people at the top. And the people at the bottom are saying, hey, that's not fair. All right. So they want to change the system of classes. Also at this time, Napoleon is invading Spain. And I went over this during the Napoleonic Wars. And this is when we get the Goyan, the art by Goya of the disasters of war. And he's showing us things that are going on in Spain. What effect do you think that this war in Spain with the French has on Mexico that's so many miles away? Spain is the ruler of Mexico. Well, they're a bit distracted at the time with their war with France. So that's when this guy, write his name down, Miguel Hidalgo, he thinks it's a good idea at this time to start a rebellion in Mexico. And on 16th of September, 1810, he gives a speech that is called the Cry of Dolores. And it incites people to revolt against the European-born Spaniards. There's more to it than that, but that's the basic effect. And so from this, we get a lot of looting and dragging the elites out of their homes. Does this sound familiar at all? Sound like the French Revolution a little bit? All right, so they're going to these big palaces and looting and dragging them out of their homes and killing them. Well, this is not what Hidalgo had in mind. This level of violence, and after a while, he lost control of this mob that would just go from town to town and loot and pillage. Uh, Hidalgo was eventually caught and executed in 1811, but the dream of the independent Mexico did not die with him, and the rebellion continued. Mexico gains its independence in 1821, but from 1821 to 1876, Mexico is in. Also, during this time, we have the Franco Mexican War. I talked to you guys a little bit about this. This is where an army of French soldiers invades in Mexico. They tried to put up the puppet of, gosh, I forget his name. We looked at the painting by Manet. Anyways, that was during this time. And this guy, Porfirio Diaz, he is a general that fights against the French for Mexico. And he eventually becomes the president. Well, actually, he seizes power in 1876 and rules as president. But he ruled with an iron fist. He used brute force to maintain power and control. And a lot of people hated him for being a dictator. But a lot of people loved him for bringing an era of prosperity. He was pro business, so Mexico became richer under him. Also, when he was in power, Mexico was relatively stable. He modernized much of Mexico, and he was reelected 7 times. However, many of those times were uncontested and unchallenged. Does that not sound suspicious to you? In the 1910 election, Diaz declared himself winner, but the opponent called for armed rebellion against Diaz, and Diaz resigned and fled to Paris. He was 80 years old. He died 4 years later. All right. Also, during this time, we have the Mexican Revolution from 1910 to 1920. And when I was watching videos on this, trying to understand the Mexican Revolution, one of the presenters called it a complicated mess. And yeah, it was difficult to understand the reasons for the Mexican Revolution. Basically, there's a lot of political backstabbing, betrayal, there's coups, and a lot of chaos. There were many, many different political factions that were all fighting against each other. Diaz was forced to leave, and his replacement was murdered. It's a very complex politics among the many different groups. And also during this time, the revolutionaries were idolized. Like these two guys here, we have Pancho Villa and Emilio Zapata. These are a couple of the big names of the revolution. They were for poor people. In fact, they wanted to redistribute land to the poor people. Also, I want you to know these two guys. Madero, he was the president after Diaz. And he was in the middle politically. He was too radical for the conservatives, but he wasn't radical enough for the revolutionaries. So he was removed from power and he was murdered. And he was replaced by Huerta. And Huerta worked with the U.S. landowners of Mexican land to overthrow Madero. And then also during this time, we have the Mexican Border War. So this happens during the revolution. Pancho Villa is upset with the American politicians for helping his opposition. So he conducts a series of raids into New Mexico and Arizona in 1916. He killed 17 Americans. And America sent troops into to the border and to capture Pancho Villa and to prevent more excursions into the USA from Mexico. In 1920, the revolution ended, and the revolution was important because it marked a true break from the past. It was the beginning of a more egalitarian age, and a lot of reforms were made. And these reforms reduced the power of dictators and the Roman Catholic Church in Mexico. All right, so I went over all of that to then talk to you guys about Mexican muralism. And this is a style of art that started in the 1920s and continued on through the 1950s. And at this time, most of the citizens of Mexico were illiterate. So what the government did is they commissioned murals that could educate the citizens about the history of Mexico. And Mexican muralism, the main subject is Mexico's history and the potential for a better future. It was a style that defined the Mexican identity. And it was painted on walls because it was the most accessible place for everyone, not just for homes or for museums. So artists used innovative imagery with a socially relevant message, and the muralists reoriented history, recovered lost stories, and drafted new narratives. So here's an example of a mural that was commissioned by the Mexican government at the time. In the 1920s, Mexico is still chaotic, and artists will use murals as their primary form of expression in Mexico. Basically, it's visual propaganda. It's propaganda for the government, but sometimes the artists would use propaganda for other means and themselves. So in this mural right here, up here we have the French rule and Emperor Maximilian. That's the guy that I was trying to remember his name. We have the Porfirian era. We have the independence and the Mexican Revolution, the Reform and the Juarez area, and the United States invasion. Down here we have the Mexican eagle, which is on the flag, and then we have the Spanish conquest down here. So the murals featured atypical non-European heroes from Mexican history. They showed Aztec warriors battling Spanish, the humble peasants fighting in the revolution, common laborers of Mexico City, and the mixed race people who will forge the future of Mexico. And the three main artists that we're going to look at for the Mexican muralists are, they're a group called Los Tres Grandes, or that's what they're called. Siqueiros is on the left, Orozco is in the center, and Rivera is on the right. We're going to first take a look at Siqueiros. We're going to go to California. Where's California on this map? E. That's it's an easy state to identify. Yes, E. And we're going to go to Los Angeles. In 1932, Siqueiros was jailed in Mexico for his radical militancy. But after his release, he secured a 6-month visa to Los Angeles. And he comes here to Olvera Street in Los Angeles. Now, Olvera Street is meant to be an idealized version of a Mexican marketplace. It's very quaint, it's folkloric, it's cutesy, it's touristy, and it avoids anything that is controversial or political until he gets here. All right. So the commission, listen to what he's been asked to paint. The commission asked him to paint a mural about happy men, parrots, and palms with fruits falling into the mouths of people. That's the assignment. The original commission was intended to show the abundance of tropical America, and he painted it on a second floor wall exterior. Now, do you see any happy men? Do you see any parrots? Do you see any palms? Do you see any fruit falling into the people's mouths? No. What do you see? There's a guy on a crucifix right here. That's not happy at all.
What's in the top right corner?
All right, up here are two guys with rifles. We'll look at them a little bit closer. Behind here, we have this very oppressive pyramid. And then we have these tree branches that are growing up into the pyramid or around the pyramid. So instead of following the instructions of the commission, Siqueiros created a highly politicized critique of the American imperialism. Siqueiros used the visibility of the mural to promote his extreme socio-political views. This painting is showing America in a bad light. Like, it's almost like these are the effects of America on Mexico. So here he is, a visitor to the U.S., and then he insults the U.S. with this painting. So throughout his career, he made controversial murals, and he had a reputation of being rebellious. The work was visible only for a short period, but it was influential for its use of materials, though. This was painted with an airbrush, which is a very new technology at the time. So if we get a little bit closer, we have this pyramid in the background and what appears to be Mayan writing across the top. And then at the bottom of the pyramid, it shows crumbled ruins of the architecture of pre-Columbian civilizations. And then we have this guy is crucified on a cross with an American imperial eagle, which is a symbol for the United States, above him. And then the branches are threatening to engulf the pyramid to erase its history. We have a couple of sculptures that are hidden amongst the branches and the rubble, which is a reference to the ancient artwork of the Mayans and the Aztecs. And then these two guys up in the corner are trying to protect their land against American capitalism and American encroachment. They're defending their own heritage and lifestyle. So, what was meant to be a happy and lively mural turned into something very dark and political. This is what the mural looks like now. It was whitewashed pretty much immediately after it was painted, but they're trying to save the mural and restore it. So here's somebody working on the restoration of the mural. There is a viewing point where you can look at the mural, and then it has a photograph of what it looked like when it was first made, and you can kind of imagine that on the building across. Elsewhere in Los Angeles, somebody has recreated the mural with its full color, so that'll give you a sense of what it would have looked like back then. All right, we're going to go down to Mexico City into the Palacio de Bellas Artes, which means Palace of Beautiful Art. And in this art museum, there's three paintings that I want for us to look at that were painted by Siqueiros. They're very large murals. So if we get up there, this gives you a sense of how large the mural is. You see the person standing next to it. And it's a series of three murals put together. And the message of this mural is to celebrate the victory over fascism at the end of World War II. The side panels commemorate the victims of war and the victims of fascism. But we're going to focus on the center panel. And the message here is if democracy isn't protected, civilization cannot advance. This mural depicts a woman with exposed breasts. She's wearing a revolutionary Phrygian hat. We saw that before with Liberty Leading the People. She's an allegory for democracy. She raises her arms from the chains that have enslaved her, and in one hand she carries the torch with freedom's flame, and in the other hand she carries a white flower. There's a third heavily muscled arm that comes out from her body to represent the triumph over fascism. The man in the lower right of the painting represents fascism conquered. He's painted in grisaille, right? That's black and white paint. And again, the message is democracy is also under constant siege from powerful forces that try to limit the ability of people to choose who will rule. This mural was not well received when it was first painted. Critics said it was too simplistic and banal, which means it's too easy to understand. But Siqueiros wanted his art to be easily understood by everyone. These are the two side panels for the victims of war and the victims of fascism. This is the painting that I want you to remember for the test. It's the Torment of Cuauhtémoc. So this takes place during the Spanish conquest of Mesoamerica. Spanish soldiers are torturing Cuauhtémoc. He's a Mexican tribal leader, and he's the last emperor of the Aztecs. Look at how stoic he is. He's the one on the bottom. His feet are on fire, his legs are on fire, and he's just laying there. Next to him is Tetlapanquetzal, and he's a Mexican king, and the Spaniards are trying to make him confess the location of the Montezuma treasure. Notice the armored Spanish soldiers. They're faceless as they watch impassively. Siqueiros stripped them of their humanity. On the left, we have a blood-stained female figure. She is the Mexican motherland, and she stretches her arms out protectively over Cuauhtémoc. There's a girl next to her in the same pose, but her hands are cut off. And the woman in blue is La Malinche. She is a woman of noble blood, but she was captured and was given to Cortez. She became a slave and translator. All right, now we're going to move on to Orozco. He was the oldest of the Mexican muralists, and his art is also based on Mexican history. We're going to take a look at this one, Maternity. It's also located in Mexico City, and it's one of Orozco's earliest frescoes. And it depicts a mother and child. It looks a lot like European paintings of Madonna and child. But one of the big differences here is that in Orozco's, she's not wearing any clothes, or the mother and the child are not wearing any clothes. And that kind of reminded me of Modus and Becker. But we have this very European kind of look to it, where these figures with their fabric that is floating in the wind is coming towards the mother and the child, almost like Botticelli's Birth of Venus. They have a very similar kind of composition. And then the ladies down there eating grapes, and that is a reference to ancient classical imagery. And grapes are associated with Dionysus. Notice that both the women have blonde hair. So he's definitely modeling these people after Europeans. He's using a classically inspired composition in the representation of the figures, and also he's using a pyramidal composition, which is seen a lot in European art. And then you can see the blue that she has over her head and what she's sitting on is the same kind of blue that Mary is often depicted with. So remember, Mexican government is wanting these artists to show Mexican themes. So why is Orozco creating art with such an obvious European influence? And it's because Orozco used European figures and references as a revolt for this particular painting. At the time, the government was talking about how equity had been achieved for everybody. And Orozco in this painting is saying, well, not really. Like, equity hasn't been achieved. We still have a long ways to go. So the government is like telling lies that, they've cured racism, basically, is what they're saying. All right. That everybody is equal now. And Orozco's like saying, no, they're not. So in this painting, he's going against the wishes of the government. All right, I've got a story time for you. This is an ancient Greek myth. And so Zeus wants Prometheus and Epimetheus to distribute all the gifts of the gods to all the creatures of the world. Zeus is a god, Prometheus and Epimetheus are titans, and this is before man is created, or man has been created, they just don't have any gifts yet. Anyways, Prometheus puts Epimetheus in charge of giving the gifts of the gods to the animals. For example, he gives wings to birds to allow them to fly. He gives fins to the fish to allow them to swim. He gives claws to the predators to allow them to eat. While all this is going on, Prometheus is sculpting man out of clay. But by the time he gets around to giving attributes to man, they're all out of attributes. So he has nothing to give to man. And so man is a hopeless creature. He doesn't know what to do. He doesn't know where he's going. He's pretty depressed. So Prometheus feels sorry for him and gives man fire. Also, Prometheus teaches man about language, and he teaches man about science, and he teaches man about medicine. So man is doing pretty well now. And then Zeus gets jealous. He says, I want all humans to give me their sacrifice. And Prometheus, he's able to sweet talk Zeus into, hey, how about we just give you half? And Zeus agrees to that. So then Prometheus separates the good meat from the bad meat. And then what he does is he makes a lot of good meat and then puts a little bit of bad meat on the top. So it looks like a pile of bad meat. Then he takes a lot of bad meat, puts a little bit of good meat on the top to make it look like a pile of good meat. And this is the pile that Zeus chooses. And when he realizes that he's been tricked, he gets angry and takes fire away from man. Prometheus, he then goes and returns fire to man. And then when Zeus looks down at man and sees that they have fires all lit, he gets angry with Prometheus. And he ties him to a rock. And every day an eagle comes and eats his liver and then flies off. And then the liver grows back. And this happens every day. So that is the story of Prometheus. And I told you that story to show you our next artwork. We're going to go to California. And in Southern California, there's a city called Claremont, which has Pomona College in it. And inside this college, they have a cafeteria area. and with a mural right there on that back wall. So let's go take a look at this mural. In the 1930s, it was popular for Mexican muralists to paint murals in the United States. In Mexico, money for murals had dried up, and many of these muralists were communists. And so the communists were being arrested and executed in Mexico. And also during the Great Depression, the US government paid for murals to put people back to work. So this was a win-win for the Mexican muralists. So here we have a painting of Prometheus, and he is reaching up to get fire from the sky to give it to the people that are down below him. And look at how wretched they are. This is Orozco's first modern fresco in the United States. The fire is a symbol of wisdom and enlightenment. It also represents God. Prometheus is about to give mankind the power of knowledge. This theme is certainly appropriate for a university, but he knows Zeus will punish him for his treason. And so notice that Prometheus is rising up out of the top, but we have a lot of really these energetic lines that are pointing up, that has the motion going up. Then also we have these interesting blue down in the lower corners to counterbalance all the red and orange up in the sky. And then we have these triangles that are pointing up as well. It's a really interesting composition. Okay, next we're going to go to New Hampshire. Which region of the United States is New Hampshire in? E. It is in E. So we're going to go to this region. Oh, by the way, can we name all the regions? What is A? What do you call all these states in blue? Yeah, that's called Western. All right, that's the Western United States. What is orange? Southwestern. What is purple? It's the Midwest. And then D would be called the South. And then E is the Northeast or New England. So we're going to go into New England. Which of these states is New Hampshire? Yeah, that's right. A is New Hampshire. So in New Hampshire, we have Dartmouth College. And in Dartmouth College, they have a library. And down in the basement of the library, there's these 3 rooms. By the way, I want you to draw these 3 rooms in your sketchbook. This rectangle down here, I want you to draw that. In this room, oh, and I want you to label these. In this room right here, we have ancient Mesoamerica. And in this room right here, he has Cortez and his effect on modern Mexico. And the room in the middle is modern industrial Mexico. And these are what the rooms look like with the murals. So this is the mural on the ancient side, and we'll take a closer look. In the first panel here on the left, that's called the migration. This is the origins of the indigenous American civilization. And on the right, we have human sacrifice by the Aztecs. You can see they're cutting open the victim and cutting out his heart to give to the gods so that the sun will rise again the next day. We want to make sure that we always do that. And then if you turn to your right, there's this part of the mural. We're going to take a look at this one, where these are some Aztec warriors who are wearing eagle and jaguar outfits, and that helps give them the attributes of those animals. And do you see at the bottom there is this sculpture of a snake? Do you guys remember that?
Yes.
All right, that's Quetzalcoatl. Yeah, he's the feathered snake serpent god of the Aztecs and the Mayans. Mayans had a different name for him, though. All right. And then next to that, we have this mural right here. And that guy right there, that's Quetzalcoatl as a human being instead of a feathered serpent. And he has come in and he's getting rid of all the previous gods. And so the one on the far left, that's Xipe Totec. He is the god of greed, and he dresses in the skins of his victims. The guy with the black and yellow face, that is Tezcatlipoca. He is the god of magic, and his feet are smoking mirrors. And then we have Tlaloc, the god of rain and storms. And then we have Mictlan Tecutli, and he is the god of death. And Huitzilopochtli, he's the god of war. Whoops. And Then we have Huehueteyote, and he is the god of fire. Quetzalcoatl or Quetzalcoatl is right here. He's inspiring humankind. Oh, by the way, when these other gods were ruling over Mesoamerica, it was all in chaos. All right, people were all against each other, and it was a chaotic mess. When Quetzalcoatl comes, everybody's now peaceful because he is waking them up from the deep sleep, and he has the temples of the sun and the moon are right here, so they are learning religion. And then over here they are talking to each other, they're learning how to coexist with each other and talk out their issues and cooperate with each other and understand each other. Quetzalcoatl teaches man agriculture, he teaches man art, and he teaches man science. The guy on the left, he's harvesting corn. This guy right here, he's carving a stele. We talked about those last semester. And then this guy right here, who looks like he's smelling his armpit, is looking at the stars and reading the stars and making a calendar. So he's all about the science. Quetzalcoatl's reign led to a golden age of peaceful human cooperation, creativity, and understanding. But the people didn't want that. All right. They wanted the chaos. They wanted to worship their old gods. And so they kicked out Quetzalcoatl. And it was one of those situations where, like, you can't fire me, I quit. And then so he leaves on this raft made out of snakes. And then over here, he's pointing to this. Do you see what this is? Yeah, it's a cross. He says, I'll be back. And when I come back, you'll be sorry. What does that sound like to you? It sounds like the Last Judgment. All right. So, but anyways, he's pointing to this, and he's making a reference to when the Christians come, it's not going to be pleasant for the people of Mesoamerica. All right, now in the other room, we begin with Cortez, and so we'll take a closer look at this. It is the second coming of Quetzalcoatl. This is the 16th century Spanish invasion of Mexico, led by Hernan Cortez, and it is brutal. Quetzalcoatl is not bringing in a new golden age. Instead, he is bringing in pain and suffering. So Quetzalcoatl, as Cortez, has come to destroy all native culture and then impose European culture on the indigenous people. Notice how calm he looks while people are suffering all around him. And he's surrounded by destruction. And in the panel that's right next to that is we've jumped now to the 20th century, and we're now in the modern age. And this is a monstrous, chaotic machine with no recognizable function. So the message here is that modern life is just mechanization, and that mass regimentation of modern society is not really that great. We have society's dependence on modern technology, and this is the impersonal chaos of the modern era. And this is the impact of the European technology and culture, and this is the consequence of industrialization. In the panel to the right of that, we have a woman who is teaching the younger children, and they're all very English. You know, like they have the blonde hair. The teacher looks very tall and stern faced, and she's an agent of control. The children are very strictly regimented and expressionless, and the schoolhouse in the background is the symbol of universal education. So this panel represents the institutional education as sterile and dead. It looks more oppressive than it does insightful or instructional. And in the background on the left, we have a town meeting. But then look at how unemotional that is, and look at how regimented that is. All the men look the same, all the women look the same. It's like they've lost their culture. In the next panel, we have a revolutionary in the middle who looks a lot like Emiliano Zapata, who was a revolutionary leader. But surrounding him, we have the military industrial complex. Back here, we have rich men, and over here we have rich men, but they're wearing masks. And it almost looks like they're pushing the military men forward who are then falling on these bags of money down here. In the background, we have a building with all the windows are blown out. And then up here, we have all these columns, which are a reference to classical architecture. And the revolutionary, he doesn't know like what to do. He really can't make a change with all of this going on around him. And then the final panel of this room, we have this one. It looks like a skeleton giving birth to a baby skeleton. And behind them are these academicians, these professors that are skeletons. And then behind them, it's all fire. So they're ignoring the problems of the world and just focusing on academics. And then they have these babies in jars down below that are on top of books. That is a message that we have a futile dissemination of false, meaningless knowledge. And then in the central room is modern Mexico, where it shows people building new structures and new architecture. All right, we're going to move now to Mexico, and we're going to go to Jalisco, and we're going to go into the government palace, this building right here. And inside this palace, there's a big staircase. And if you go up the staircase, you'll see this mural right here. It's absolutely huge. In fact, if you get an image of it or you see people next to it, you can see how large this painting is. But this is the main staircase of the government palace with an enormous fresco covering the ceilings and walls. The guy in the center is Miguel Hidalgo. He is the one who led the revolt against the rich Europeans in 1810. The revolt was unsuccessful and he was executed. But Hidalgo is regarded as the person who instigated the Mexican push for independence. On the one hand, Orozco praised Hidalgo for his role in encouraging the revolution and the rebellion. But on the other hand, Orozco condemned him for being a Roman Catholic priest. It was Hidalgo's job to convert the indigenous people to a foreign faith. So as Orozco sees it, Hidalgo fought for the oppressed while at the same time contributed to their oppression. And you can relate this mural to the Pantocrator images from the Byzantine era. In fact, it has kind of the same composition where it has this large figure in the center, and then Jesus in this one has this what's called a mandorla, which is this halo behind him, and Hidalgo has kind of a halo of fire behind him. And also, you can compare it to the Pantocrators of the Byzantine era for its size and the stern-faced look on the face of the figure. And then Hidalgo is offering the sick and war-ridden mankind fire down here, which is much like Prometheus did for man over here. At the bottom, you have all these writhing people. It's a chaotic mass of desperate humanity, and they're all painted in grisaille, which is painting in black and white. On another part, we have a bunch of writhing people, but also look at the symbolism that's in there. All right, you see the swastikas, right? What else do you see? Crosses. What else do you see? Right, there's Soviet imagery, the hammer and the sickle everywhere. So there's lots of swastikas, lots of hammers and sickles, and this cross right in here. Then I want you to notice this thing right here. Does anybody know what that is? That is a fasces, that Fasces, and that is some wooden rods and an axe are held together with leather straps. It's a symbol. It's a Roman symbol of power and executive authority. You can use the wooden rods to beat your subjects into submission, or you can use the axe to execute your plan or execute the people. But this is where the word fascism comes from. It comes from this object right here. So you can see it a lot in artworks. We'll see another one in a few more slides. But I want to come back to the message here is that fascism and communism and religion are all fighting amongst each other. And there's constant conflict with each other.